I thought finding that genetic testing bill was the worst thing that could happen to my marriage. I was wrong. My wife had been stealing hundreds of thousands while I worked 16-hour days. But the prenup she forced me to sign? It had one clause she never read. Now she's about to learn why. My name is Lance Hawthorne. I'm 42 years old, and up until 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I work as an IT project manager for a mid-sized tech company in Austin, Texas. Good salary, steady work, the kind of job that lets you sleep soundly knowing you can provide for your family. Felicia runs a boutique clothing store downtown, or at least, that's what I thought she was doing with her time. We have 3 kids. Asher, who's 8 and sharp as a tack, Luna, 5 years old and the spitting image of her mother, and little Samuel, who just turned 2. Samuel's got these bright green eyes that don't match mine or Felicia's brown ones. But hey, genetics can be funny, right? That's what I told myself every time someone mentioned how different he looked from his siblings. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself with fireworks and dramatic music. It creeps in quiet as a house cat, patting around on soft paws while you're busy living your life. For me, it started with a receipt I found wedged between the couch cushions, a medical bill for genetic counseling that I'd never heard about. When I asked Felicia about it, she just shrugged and said it was routine stuff for Samuel's pediatric checkup. Nothing to worry about, honey, she said, not even looking up from her phone. Just being thorough. But I've been managing IT projects for 12 years. I know what thorough looks like, and I know what evasion sounds like too. Thorough would have included me in the conversation. Thorough would have meant discussing why our 2-year-old needed genetic counseling when our other kids never did. That night, after Felicia fell asleep, I sat in my home office staring at that receipt. The date was from 3 weeks ago, right around the time she'd been working late more often. The clinic was across town, nowhere near Samuel's regular pediatrician. And the bill? It wasn't for routine counseling. It was for paternity testing. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I did what I do best. I started gathering data. Every financial statement, every joint account summary, every piece of paperwork that had Felicia's signature on it. What I found would have impressed me if it hadn't been slowly destroying my world. My wife wasn't just unfaithful. She was methodical about it. She'd opened accounts I didn't know about. She'd moved money in patterns that would make a forensic accountant proud. And somewhere in the middle of it all, she'd had our youngest son tested to see if I was actually his father. The results, when I finally got my hands on them, confirmed what those green eyes had been trying to tell me for 2 years. Samuel wasn't mine. But by then, that was just one more piece of evidence in a growing pile that would eventually bury the life we'd built together. I should have confronted her immediately. A stronger man might have. But I'm methodical too, and something told me that rushing and guns blazing would only give her time to cover her tracks. So I waited, and I watched. I documented everything. Because if Felicia wanted to play games with our family's future, I was going to make sure I knew all the rules. The hardest part about discovering your wife's betrayal isn't the anger, it's the clarity. Suddenly, every strange conversation makes perfect sense. Every excuse clicks into place like puzzle pieces you've been holding upside down for months. I spent the next week digging through our digital life like an archaeologist. Felicia had always been careless with passwords, using the same variations everywhere. Her laptop, supposedly used only for boutique inventory, told a different story entirely. "Daddy, why are you on Mommy's computer?" Asher asked one evening, catching me in Felicia's home office. "Just helping her with some technical issues, buddy," I replied, closing the laptop. "You know how moms are with computers." Asher nodded and wandered off, but his question stuck with me. Here I was, violating my wife's privacy because she'd already violated our marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me. What I found made my stomach turn. Email threads with someone named Damian Cross, discussing their future together, and, when Lance finally figures it out, bank transfers to accounts under her maiden name, investment portfolios I'd never heard of, and worst of all, messages about Samuel. The test came back positive. Felicia had written to Damian, "He's definitely yours. Now we just need to figure out the timing." I printed everything. Every email, every bank statement, every piece of evidence that proved my wife had been planning this for years. The woman I trusted with my heart, my home, and my children had been systematically dismantling our life while I worked 16-hour days to provide for what I thought was our family. The boutique. That was real enough. but it was being used to launder money from Damien's construction company. Apparently, my wife had been having an affair with a married contractor who was as eager to hide assets from his own wife as Felicia was from me. That night, I called my mother, Ruth. She lives about 20 minutes away and has always been sharp as a tack when it comes to reading people. I knew something was off about that girl, Ruth said after I gave her the basic facts. The way she always changed the subject when I asked about her business. And those expensive handbags she claimed were good knockoffs. Mom, I need your help, I said. Not just emotional support. Legal help. You still have connections from your paralegal days, right? Ruth's voice turned serious. What do you need, son? I need to make sure she doesn't take everything when this explodes. And I need to make sure she doesn't take my kids. Our kids, Ruth corrected gently. Samuel might not be biologically yours, but you've been his father for 2 years. That matters in court. She was right. Whatever Felicia had done, whatever lies she'd told, I wasn't going to abandon that little boy. He deserved better than being a pawn in his mother's games. I'll make some calls, Ruth said. But Lance, whatever you're planning, make sure you're thinking 3 steps ahead. Women like Felicia don't go down without a fight. I hung up knowing she was absolutely right. But what Felicia didn't know was that I'd already been thinking 3 steps ahead. I just hadn't been thinking about the right game. Ruth delivered on her promise faster than I expected. 3 days after our phone call, she showed up at my office with a business card and a grim smile. Meet tomorrow at 10, Ruth said, sliding the card across my desk. Patricia Kendall, family law. She's handled cases like this before, and she doesn't lose. That evening, I sat Asher and Luna down for what I hoped would be a casual conversation. Samuel was already asleep upstairs, which made things easier. Kids, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, I said, sitting on the couch between them. Has Mommy ever had friends over when I'm at work? Adult friends. Asher shifted uncomfortably. You mean like Uncle Damien? My heart stopped. Uncle Damien comes over when I'm not here. Sometimes, Luna chimed in. He brings presents and plays with Samuel a lot. Mommy says he's Samuel's special friend. I kept my voice steady, but inside I was screaming. How often does Uncle Damien visit? Maybe twice a week. Asher said, but Mommy told us not to talk about it, because it would make you sad. There it was. Felicia had been coaching my children to lie to me, using them as accomplices in her deception, while I worked 60-hour weeks to support the family. It's okay that you told me, I said, pulling both kids closer. You're not in trouble. But from now on, I want you to tell me about any visitors, okay? No more secrets. The next morning, Patricia Kendall turned out to be exactly what I needed. A sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who spoke in facts instead of emotions. Show me what you've got, Kendall said, settling into her chair. I handed over the folder I'd prepared. Bank statements, email printouts, the paternity test results, everything. She reviewed each page methodically, making notes in precise handwriting. This is thorough work, Kendall said finally. Your wife has been busy. But Lance, I need to ask, do you have a prenuptial agreement? Yes. Felicia insisted on it before we married. Said it would protect both of us. I'll need to see it. Prenups can work both ways, depending on the language. Kendall leaned forward. Based on what you've shown me, we have grounds for divorce on infidelity and financial misconduct. But the custody battle will be the real fight. She'll use the children as leverage. She's already started, I said, thinking about the secrets she taught them to keep. Then we need to move fast. I want you to document every interaction with her from now on. Record conversations if Texas law allows. And Lance, start thinking about what kind of father you want to be when this is over, because that little boy will need you regardless of biology. Finding our prenuptial agreement turned out to be easier than I expected. Felicia had filed it with our other important documents, probably because she thought it made her untouchable. She was about to learn how wrong she was. I pulled the document Friday night, after Felicia went to bed early, claiming a headache. More likely, she was texting Damien about their weekend plans while I was scheduled to work Saturday morning, catching up on project deadlines. Reading through the prenup, I remembered why Felicia had been so insistent about it. Standard stuff, mostly separate property protections, debt limitations, inheritance clauses. But buried on page 7 was something I'd almost forgotten about, Clause 7C. In the event of marital infidelity involving undisclosed financial transactions, The entirety of marital assets reverts to the non-offending party. I stared at those words for a full minute. 9 years ago, when Felicia's lawyer drafted this agreement, they'd included a clause that would basically hand me everything if she cheated and hid money. The irony was perfect. The prenup she demanded to protect herself was going to be the weapon that destroyed her. Saturday morning, I called Patricia Kendall from my office. Patricia, I found the prenup. You're going to want to see Clause 7C. Read it to me. After I finished, there was silence on the other end. Finally, Kendall spoke. Lance, this is enforceable. If you can prove infidelity and financial misconduct, which you can, that clause gives you legal grounds to claim all marital assets. House, cars, business interests, everything. What about the kids? That's separate from asset division. But having financial stability will strengthen your custody case significantly. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I installed tracking software on our family computer. Every keystroke, every website visit, every document Felicia opened would be logged and backed up to a secure server. It felt like crossing a line, but Felicia had crossed that line months ago when she started stealing from our family's future. By Sunday evening, I had enough evidence to bury her. Email chains with Damien discussing their exit strategy. Bank transfers timed to coincide with my business trips. Even a draft email to a divorce attorney that she'd never sent, outlining how she planned to claim the house in primary custody. The woman I'd married was planning to destroy me. But thanks to a clause in the very document she'd insisted we sign, I was about to turn her own weapon against her. Monday morning, I scheduled another meeting with Patricia Kendall. It was time to stop gathering evidence and start using it. Patricia Kendall scheduled our meeting for Tuesday morning, but Monday night changed everything. I was reviewing project timelines in my home office when I heard Felicia on the phone in the kitchen, her voice carrying that particular edge it gets when she thinks she's outsmarting someone. No, Damien, he doesn't suspect anything, Felicia said. Lance is too focused on work to notice what's happening under his own roof. We stick to the plan. I moved closer to the kitchen doorway, staying in the shadows. The divorce papers are ready, she continued. My lawyer says with the prenup, I'll keep the house and get primary custody. You just need to make sure your wife doesn't find out until after everything's finalized. My hands turned into fists. She was talking about destroying our family like it was a business transaction. Samuel's getting attached to you, which is perfect, Felicia said, her voice softening. When this is over, we'll be a real family. No more sneaking around. That was enough. I stepped into the kitchen doorway where she could see me. When what's over, Felicia? I asked quietly. She spun around. Phone still pressed her ear. Her face went white, then red, then settled into that defiant expression I'd seen too many times lately. I'll call you back, she told Damien, ending the call. We stood there staring at each other across the kitchen island like gunfighters in an old western. 9 years of marriage, 3 children, and countless promises reduced to this moment of absolute clarity. How long have you been listening? Felicia asked. Long enough. How long have you been planning to destroy our family? I'm not destroying anything, Lance. I'm fixing it. You're never here. You don't pay attention to what the kids need, and you certainly don't pay attention to what I need. What you need? You mean money that isn't yours? A relationship with another man while you're married to me? Teaching our children to lie. Felicia's jaw tightened. Those children deserve better than a father who works himself to death and ignores his family. Samuel isn't even my child, is he? The question hung in the air like smoke. Felicia's defiance faltered for just a moment, revealing something that might have been shame. Biology isn't everything, she said finally. No, but honesty is. Trust is. The things you threw away for whatever this is with Damien. You want to talk about honesty? Felicia's voice turned sharp. Let's talk about how you've been spying on me, going through my things, violating my privacy. Your privacy? You've been stealing from our family, Felicia. Moving money to accounts I didn't know about. Using our children as accessories to your lies. That money is mine. I earned it. Through the boutique that you've been using to launder Damien's construction profits. Through the investment accounts you opened with my credit information. None of that money is yours, and you know it. Something shifted in Felicia's expression. The defiance was still there, but now it was mixed with calculation. You can't prove any of that, she said. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Actually, I can. Every email, every bank transfer, every lie you've told. It's all documented, Felicia. including that Clause 7C in the prenup you were so proud of. What are you talking about? Read your own contract. Infidelity plus financial misconduct equals you lose everything. The house, the accounts, custody of the kids. Everything. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Without thinking, she glanced at it, and I saw Damien's name on the screen. You might want to tell your boyfriend that his wife might be interested in those construction contracts you've been discussing, I said. I'm betting she doesn't know about the money laundering either. Felicia's face went ashen. You wouldn't. Watch me. Felicia hired her own attorney within 48 hours of our kitchen confrontation. Jonathan Rivers, a slick downtown lawyer whose billboard advertisements promised to fight for your rights in divorce proceedings. Apparently, Felicia thought hiring an aggressive attorney would intimidate me into settling quietly. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Patricia Kendall called me Wednesday morning with news that made my day considerably brighter. Lance, I just got off the phone with Jonathan Rivers. He wants to schedule a mediation session for next week. Claims his client is willing to negotiate a reasonable settlement. What does reasonable mean to them? Split custody. Felicia keeps the house. You take responsibility for any hidden debts she might have incurred. Standard stuff when the wife's attorney thinks the husband is desperate to avoid scandal. I laughed out loud. They really don't know about Clause 7C, do they? Apparently not. Rivers spent 20 minutes explaining why the prenup protects his client from losing marital assets. I didn't correct him. What's our move? We let them walk into the trap. Go to mediation, let Rivers make his demands, then introduce the evidence and the real interpretation of the prenup. It'll be more effective than ambushing them in court. That evening, I had another conversation with Asher and Luna. Samuel was playing with blocks in the living room, close enough that I could keep an eye on him, but far enough that he couldn't understand our discussion. Kids, I need to tell you something important, I said, sitting on the floor between them. Mommy and Daddy are going to be living in different houses soon. Asher's face scrunched up. Like Tyler's parents did. Yes, like Tyler's parents. But this doesn't change how much I love you, and it doesn't change that I'll always be your daddy. What about Samuel? Luna asked, glancing at her little brother. I'll always take care of Samuel, too. He's part of our family. But Uncle Damien said he's Samuel's daddy, Asher said quietly. My blood pressure spiked, but I kept my voice calm. When did Uncle Damien tell you that? Last week. He said pretty soon Samuel would come live with him and Mommy in a new house, and we could visit sometimes. The rage that shot through me was white-hot and pure. Damien had been discussing custody arrangements with my 8-year-old son, essentially telling him that his baby brother was being taken away. Using children to deliver emotional manipulation was a new low, even for this situation. Asher, Luna, listen to me very carefully, I said. No matter what anyone tells you, you three are staying together. I will make sure of that. Do you understand? Both kids nodded, but I could see the confusion and fear in their eyes. They were old enough to sense that their world was falling apart, but too young to understand why. That night, I called Patricia Kendall at home. Patricia, I need to add something to our case file. Damien Cross has been discussing custody arrangements with my children, telling them he's taking Samuel away from his siblings. That's emotional manipulation of minors. We can use that. How? In custody hearings, judges care about stability and the children's best interests. A man who tells an 8-year-old that he's breaking up the family is not acting in those children's best interests, even though Samuel is biologically his. Biology is one factor, Lance. But Samuel has lived with you as his father for 2 years. The court will consider what's best for Samuel, not what's convenient for Damien. Friday morning, I did something that felt both necessary and terrible. I installed recording software on the kids' tablets and phones. If Felicia or Damien were going to use my children as weapons, I wanted documentation of exactly what they were saying to them. The mediation was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Jonathan Rivers probably thought he was walking into a negotiation where his client held all the cards. He was about to discover that Felicia had been playing poker while I was playing chess. The mediation meeting was held in a sterile conference room downtown, the kind of place where lives get dissected and reassembled according to legal formulas. Jonathan Rivers strutted in like he owned the building, carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Felicia sat beside him looking perfectly composed. Designer dress, fresh manicure, the picture of a wronged wife seeking justice. She didn't even glance at me when I entered with Patricia. "Gentlemen, ladies," Rivers began, settling into his chair with theatrical confidence. "Let's keep this simple. My client is prepared to be generous in this dissolution, despite the emotional trauma she's endured." Patricia and I exchanged glances. This was going to be even better than we'd hoped. "Mrs. Hawthorne will retain the marital residence," Rivers continued, consulting his notes. "Primary custody of all 3 children, with supervised visitation for Mr. Hawthorne, pending completion of anger management counseling." Anger management? I spoke for the first time. "My client has documented instances of intimidating behavior and invasion of privacy," Rivers said smoothly. Felicia finally looked at me, and there was something cold and calculated in her expression. She was enjoying this performance. "Additionally," Rivers continued, "Mr. Hawthorne will assume responsibility for any debts incurred during the marriage, including recent business investments made in good faith by Mrs. Hawthorne." "Business investments?" Patricia asked innocently. "Consulting fees, equipment purchases, standard entrepreneurial expenses. All legitimate business costs that unfortunately didn't generate the expected returns." I watched Felicia nod solemnly, playing the role of the disappointed entrepreneur. The woman had missed her calling as an actress. "In exchange for this generous arrangement," Rivers concluded, "Mrs. Hawthorne is prepared to waive spousal support and allow Mr. Hawthorne to retain his retirement accounts." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "That's very interesting, Mr. Rivers. Before we respond, perhaps you'd like to review the prenuptial agreement your client signed." "We've reviewed it thoroughly. Standard asset protection clauses that clearly favor my client's position." "Including Clause 7C. Rivers frowned. "I'm not sure what you're referring to." Patricia slid a highlighted copy of the prenup across the table. "Page 7, paragraph C. Please read it aloud." Rivers scanned the page, and I watched his face change as he found the clause. The color drained from his cheeks as he read silently. "Out loud, please," Patricia prompted. "In the event of marital infidelity involving undisclosed financial transactions," Rivers read slowly, "the entirety of marital assets reverts to the non-offending party." Felicia sat forward. "What does that mean?" Rivers was quiet for a long moment, rereading the clause. When he looked up, his theatrical confidence was gone. "It means," Patricia said pleasantly, "that if we can prove adultery and financial misconduct, your client loses everything. House accounts, business interests, everything." "You can't prove," Felicia started. I opened my folder and began placing documents on the table. Email printouts, bank statements, paternity test results, photographs from the security cameras. Each piece of paper landed with quiet precision. "Actually," I said, "I can prove all of it." Felicia stared at the evidence spreading across the table like a cancer diagnosis. Her perfect composure finally began to develop splits around the edges. "The prenup is bulletproof," I continued. "You insisted on it, remember? You said it would protect us both. Turns out you were half right." Rivers was frantically flipping through pages, probably looking for loopholes that didn't exist. "This is entrapment," Felicia whispered. "No," I said quietly. "This is consequences." The actual divorce hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks after the mediation disaster, but Jonathan Rivers tried to delay it 3 times. Apparently, he needed time to figure out how to defend the indefensible. Judge Patricia Hernandez was known for running an efficient courtroom and having little patience for dramatics. When Rivers stood to make his opening argument, she looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Your Honor," Rivers began, "my client has been the victim of an elaborate campaign of harassment and intimidation designed to—" "Mr. Rivers," Judge Hernandez interrupted, "I've reviewed the prenuptial agreement and the submitted evidence. Do you have any legal basis for challenging Clause 7C? Rivers stammered for a moment. "Your Honor, that clause was buried in technical language that my client couldn't reasonably be expected to understand. Your client had legal representation when she signed it, correct?" "Yes, but—" "And she insisted on the prenuptial agreement, despite her husband's initial reluctance." Patricia had done her homework. The court record included testimony from the original attorney who drafted the agreement, confirming that Felicia had demanded the prenup and that all terms have been explained to both parties. "Yes, Your Honor, but the circumstances have changed." "The circumstances?" Judge Hernandez said dryly, are exactly what the clause was designed to address. I watched Felicia sitting at the defendant's table, her perfect composure finally completely shattered. She kept glancing at Damien, who sat in the gallery, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Mrs. Hawthorne, the judge said, please stand. Felicia rose unsteadily. Are you familiar with Clause 7C of your prenuptial agreement? My lawyer said the prenup was standard protection. That's not what I asked. Are you familiar with Clause 7C? Felicia's voice was barely audible. I am now. And do you understand that by engaging in extramarital affairs while concealing financial assets, you triggered the conditions outlined in that clause? Your Honor, I can explain. Ma'am, this is not a negotiation. This is a legal proceeding based on a contract you signed willingly and enthusiastically. Judge Hernandez turned to Patricia. Counselor, your client is seeking full enforcement of Clause 7C. Yes, Your Honor. All marital assets, including the residence, joint accounts, and business interests, and custody, primary physical custody of all 3 children, with reasonable visitation for Mrs. Hawthorne, including the child who is not biologically related to your client. Samuel has known Mr. Hawthorne as his father for 2 years, Your Honor. Stability and continuity serve the child's best interests. Judge Hernandez nodded. Mr. Rivers, does your client wish to contest the paternity evidence or the financial documentation? Rivers looked at Felicia, who just shook her head. No, Your Honor. Then this matter is straightforward. The prenuptial agreement is valid and enforceable. Clause 7C has been triggered by documented infidelity and financial misconduct. All marital assets transfer to Mr. Hawthorne. The gavel fell with a sound like a gunshot. Felicia turned to look at me, her eyes wide with something that might have been recognition. Not anger, not defiance, but understanding. For the first time in our marriage, she finally saw me clearly. The prenup she demanded to protect herself had become the weapon that destroyed her, and the quiet husband she'd underestimated had been playing chess while she was playing checkers. 3 months after the court ruling, I stood in the kitchen of what was now legally my house, watching Samuel play with blocks while Asher and Luna did homework at the dining table. The normalcy felt surreal after everything we'd been through. Felicia had moved into a small apartment across town. The court-ordered supervised visitation meant she saw the kids every other weekend, with a social worker present to ensure no inappropriate discussions about the divorce or Damien. Daddy, Luna said, looking up from her math worksheet. When is Mommy coming to pick us up? Saturday afternoon, sweetheart. Same as always. The transition hadn't been easy for any of us, but kids are more resilient than adults give them credit for. They'd adapted to the new routine with the kind of matter-of-fact acceptance that children excel at. Damien had disappeared from their lives entirely after his wife divorced him and took half his construction business. Apparently, Patricia Kendall hadn't been bluffing about contacting Mrs. Cross with information about her husband's extracurricular activities. Ruth visited most evenings, helping with dinner and bedtime routines. Having her support had made the difference between surviving and thriving during those first difficult weeks. Any word from Felicia's attorney about the asset settlement? Ruth asked, joining me in the kitchen. Final paperwork should be done next week. The boutique sale went through, and the hidden accounts have been transferred back into the kids' education funds where they belong. And Samuel? I looked at the little boy who'd called me daddy for 2 years, the child who might not share my DNA, but had my heart completely. Samuel is my son. Biology doesn't change that. Ruth smiled. Your father would be proud of how you handled this, Lance. I just did what needed to be done. No, you did more than that. You protected your family without becoming the kind of man who destroys everything around him. That takes real strength. That evening, after the kids were asleep, I found myself thinking about the man I'd become over the past year. I wasn't the same person who discovered that medical bill wedged between couch cushions. I was stronger, more decisive, more protective of what mattered. Felicia had taught me something valuable, though I doubt she'd intended to. Sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous. Not because we're violent or cruel, but because we see everything, remember everything, and plan accordingly. I never wanted to use those skills against someone I loved again, but I'd keep them sharp, just in case. 1 year later, I stood in the backyard watching Asher teach Samuel how to throw a baseball, while Luna practiced cartwheels on the grass. The Texas heat was brutal, but the sound of children laughing made it bearable. Patricia Kennel had called that morning with final news about Felicia's legal situation. The last of the hidden assets had been recovered and transferred to legitimate accounts. Damien's construction company had paid substantial penalties for the money laundering scheme, and both he and Felicia were banned from opening business accounts without court oversight. More importantly, Patricia had said, the supervised visitation reports have been consistently positive. Felicia's learning to be a better mother, even if she'll never be a wife again. Samuel ran over to me. Baseball glove too big for his small hands, but determination written all over his face. Daddy, did you see? I caught it 3 times. I saw, buddy. You're getting really good at this. Asher says if I practice every day, I can be on his team when I'm bigger. Asher's a smart big brother. That evening, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the front porch with a beer and my laptop, catching up on work emails. The house felt peaceful in a way it never had when Felicia lived here. No undercurrent of tension, no whispered phone calls, no secrets poisoning the air. Ruth joined me, settling into the chair beside mine with her evening tea. Any regrets? She asked. About what? Fighting so hard for this. Taking everything from her. Some men might feel guilty about destroying their children's mother. I thought about that for a moment, watching fireflies dance across the front yard. I didn't destroy Felicia. She destroyed herself with her choices. I just made sure her choices didn't destroy my children too. And you'd do it again? To protect Asher, Luna, and Samuel? In a heartbeat. Ruth smiled. That's what I thought you'd say. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, my chest tightened. Old habits from the days when every message might be another piece of evidence in Felicia's betrayal. But it was just a client asking about scheduling a consultation for Monday morning. Normal life, normal problems, normal solutions. You know what the best part is? I told Ruth. What's that? I don't have to be suspicious anymore. I don't have to check bank statements for unauthorized transactions or wonder where my wife really is when she says she's working late. I can just be a father, and a good one. I try. Later that night, I checked on each of the kids before going to bed myself. Asher was sprawled across his mattress with a sports magazine still clutched in his hand. Luna had fallen asleep surrounded by stuffed animals and picture books. Samuel was curled up with the teddy bear he'd had since birth, thumb in his mouth despite being too old for the habit. My children, all 3 of them, regardless of biology or legal complications or the mistakes their mother had made. Standing in Samuel's doorway, I realized that Felicia had been wrong about one thing. She'd told Damien that when the divorce was over, they'd be a real family. But we already were.